Hello and welcome to this special look at the original British steam scene of yesteryear. Steam officially retired from daily use in England during August 1968, but thanks to the efforts of a dedicated band of enthusiasts who, during the 1950s and 60s, set out to record this fascinating part of everyday life, it's still possible to enjoy the sights and sounds of British steam at work. We begin at Riddings Junction on the famous Waverley route, the former North British line between Carlisle and Edinburgh. It's July 1961, and A3 Pacific Coronac is one of four of the class which spent the whole of the 1950s working this line from Carlisle Canal Shed. Riddings Junction, 14 miles north of Carlisle, is actually just in England, and here the 7-mile branch to Langholm forked off north up the valley of the River Esk. The engine is J39 64888, also of Carlisle Canal, and the branch train comprises 3 ex-LMS non-corridor bogies. This service survived until June 1964, goods lingering on for another 3 years. Hawick, roughly halfway between Carlisle and Edinburgh, is one of only 2 towns of any size on the journey of just under 100 miles. On Hawick Shed is another veteran, a Holmes North British design dating back to 1888, Class J36. The Waverley route carried a substantial fitted freight service, linking eastern Scotland with the West Coast Main Line. V2 262s were regulars on the job. 12 miles north of Hawick lies St Boswells, where a B1 sets off with a stopping service. This J36 was sub-shedded at St Boswells for working the long branch to Kelso and across to Berwick. Note the tender cab, giving the crew extra protection from the Scottish weather. At Kelso, the train crosses standard Mogul 78046, one of 4 of the type sent new to this area when built in 1955. Back at St Boswells, another of the quartet has those outsized cabside numerals favoured on the Scottish region of British Railways. The reign of this class here was sadly brief, for the Kelso branch closed to all traffic in June 1964. Here's one of Reed's Glen 440s of 1913, Class D34 on the LNER. Once the North British Railways prime express engines, here in 1961 the few survivors were ending their days on leisurely duties such as this local pick-up goods. Services on the Waverley route were not exactly speedy. The line was hilly and winding, while expresses all stopped at St Boswells and the other small border towns, virtually doubling up as locals. The Waverley route closed to all traffic in January 1969, But serious proposals to reopen at least the northern part have come and gone ever since, and it could happen yet. We begin our travels at Sunderland, one of the North East's last operational steam depots, soon before steam finished here in September 1967. Raven Q6 63395, one of the last of the class still active, was about to come under offer from the North Eastern Locomotive Preservation Group. The Preservation Group also has its eyes on 65894, one of 5 surviving Wilson Worstal Class J27 060s. Someone has been busy cleaning up the front end of this plain but honest workhorse, while red connecting rods help mark it out from the crowd. 65892, withdrawn in August 1967, just failed to make it to the end. So too did this Q6, leaking at every joint. (65835) with buffer beam snowplough. And at Doxford's shipyard at Sunderland Docks, the crane tank engine Roker is hard at work. The Wearside shipyards were of course all rail served. Giant plates and other materials were forged at steelworks on Teesside and elsewhere, and movements to the yards on running lines would mean special traffic and signalling arrangements for passing an out-of-gauge load. The Hilton Colliery branch, originally a through route to Leamside, ran along the north bank of the River Wear. National Coal Board Tank No. 15, a Hawthorns build dating from 1953, heads empty internal user wagons towards the colliery. On a very damp day, a J27 approaches the same spot with a train of loaded 21-tonners. The tracks here were separate single lines worked in both directions, but BR engines were only allowed on the left-hand one. 65879 is having real trouble on the wet rails. It's no good. The engine has slipped to a standstill and the train has had to be divided, with the rear half left in situ and all brakes pinned hard down. Near the town centre now, a northbound freight crosses the River Wear behind K1 Mogul 62044. This scene is now the site of St Peter's Station on the Tyneside Metro's Sunderland extension, opened in 2002, with the tracks uniquely shared by both Metro and National trains. The train rolls past the platforms of Monk Wearmouth Station, closed in March 1967. At Ryhope Junction, south of Sunderland, a J27 heads a train of empties towards one of the local collieries. Here, the inland route for Stockton and Ferry Hill, on which the train is running, split from the coastline to Hartlepool. The two routes then ran parallel for 1.5 miles on a shared formation before diverging. Coming up from the coastline from Seaham Colliery is 63395, looking very spick and span again. The North Eastern Locomotive Preservation Group is due a big vote of thanks for saving this fine locomotive and keeping it active on the North York Moors Railway. We're at King's Cross Station in April of 1963, a memorable year on the railways and in the wider world. The 60s were starting to swing, with a new pop group called the Beatles taking the country by storm. On British Railways' Great Northern Line, an era was coming to an end, with steam into King's Cross scheduled to finish by the middle of June. A1 Pacific 60130 Kestrel backed down into what was then Platform 8, ready to take out the 6:12 p.m. departure for Leeds. Kestrel, a West Riding engine for much of her life, was destined to become one of the last active A1s, surviving until late in 1965. B1460 61075 was a long-term resident of King's Cross Shed. Into the old Platform 5 comes V2 60871 in extremely grimy condition on an outer suburban working. Kestrel again, this time on the 6:05 p.m. Fridays only to Leeds, dubbed the 6:05 Special by pop music fans. Serving as a relief to the 6:12, which we saw a moment ago, this sort of train was often avoided by those in the know, as they tended to have no buffet car and somewhat elderly carriages. A4 Pacific 60034 Lord Farringdon departs with the 6:26 semi-fast for Doncaster and Hull. A2 Pacific 60513 Dante of Peterborough's New England Shed backs down ready to work a semi-fast to its home city. With a Brush Type 2 diesel in the background, A1 Pacific 60139 Sea Eagle leaves with the 632 parcels for York. This Gresley A3 is finding the going slippery. By this time, many of the A3s, including Pretty Polly, were coming up to 40 years old, and withdrawals were in full swing. Knebworth, just 25 miles out, was in the 60s still rural and very much an outer suburban destination. During the Second World War, when traffic control was decentralised, the Great Northern Line Control was located in this building, filmed here in the summer of 1964. A3 60066 Merryhampton speeds by on the 3 p.m. King's Cross Newcastle. It's 1963 once more, on a spring-like 10th of March. But the dreadful long winter that played havoc with the nation's transport had only lately lifted. 60061 Pretty Polly heads north. Flying Fox looks in very run-down condition. Unbraked open wagons were by now largely relegated to departmental use, like this civil engineer's train. The A3 is 60054, Prince of Wales. The 7 a.m. stopper from Peterborough was due at Knebworth at 8:39, arriving King's Cross 9:22. 60062 Minaroo heads a train of non-gangway stock that includes a Thomson LNER lavatory composite. Now it's a Sunday morning, and the 8:15 King's Cross Grantham stopper is the first down mainline train of the day. An A4 60025 Falcon speeds north. (60010) Dominion of Canada, now preserved in her namesake country. It's the morning of Thursday the 5th of September 1963 now, and 7027 Thornbury Castle is backing down onto the Cathedrals Express. From the start of the winter timetable the following Monday, this train would become diesel-hauled, but photographer Brian Rogers has secured a cab ride from his hometown through to Paddington in this last week of steam. Furthermore, one of his friends is there to photograph the train leaving, and hopefully at one or two points on the way as well. The Cathedrals Express left Hereford at 7:45 and Worcester at 8:55, due Paddington at 11:25. Driver Hughes is, on this occasion, accompanied by Inspector Allen from Gloucester. Thornbury Castle is sadly not in the spick and span condition usual for the castle on this train. Withdrawn just 3 months after this trip, she would be one of just 5 castles to go to Barry Scrapyard, when she was rescued in 1972. But a quarter of a century on, she still remains, unfortunately, dismantled. Staunton Station, 6 miles from Worcester, closed in January 1966. At Flatbury, 11 miles out, the train slows for a permanent way slack. Our line-side photographer has managed to beat the train and catch 7027 as she goes by. No mean feat on the roads of the 1960s. Approaching Evesham, first stop out of Worcester and due away at 9:12, though we shall be late this morning with that slow running. The Cathedrals Express loads to 12 bogies, and that means assistance up the bank to Chipping Campden, which includes 4 miles at 1 in 100. The pilot is a Collett 060, and the rules say that a lightly built engine like this must be coupled inside the train engine. Otherwise, with its bouncing around at the front, there could be a danger of buffer locking. This time-consuming rigmarole is often quietly ignored, but today there's an inspector on, and we're going by the book. So, our line-side friend now has time to catch up again, and here they come, battling their way up the Cotswold Scarp. Just feet away behind the tender, the chimney of the Collett is talking fortissimo. Ahead lies Campden Tunnel, nearly a mile long. The south end of the tunnel is just before the summit, and here we leave Brian Rogers' trip for a few moments to see some other trains pass by. 7002 Devizes Castle was on the same train 3 months previously. Another express comes up the bank behind 7005 Sir Edward Elgar. A long-time Worcester engine, Sir Edward was renamed from Lamphy Castle in 1957, the centenary of the famous composer's birth. Seen from above the tunnel mouth, 7025 Sudeley Castle breasts the summit with the Down Cathedrals Express. Chipping Campden station served a sizable and well-known village, but it suffered the old rural problem of being a couple of miles distant, and it too closed in January 1966. (6932) Burwarton Hall comes by with an up freight on the same day. Goods trains on Camden Bank are allowed to be banked in the rear, and the assisting engine is again a Collett 060. Later, the same afternoon, the same engine, 2246, comes by with a one-coach workman's service. We're back with Brian Rogers on the Cathedrals Express now, and the Collett 060 has been detached during the booked stop at Moreton-in-Marsh. The crew of Thornbury Castle now prepare to take on water at Charlbury Troughs, and the gauge can be seen rising quickly as the tender fills. The troughs are in the middle of a long 30-mile stretch from Moreton-in-Marsh down the valley of the River Evenlode all the way to Oxford. On the run into Oxford, we pass a mixed freight in the loop, headed by a 9F210O. Oxford is our last booked stop, from 10:10 to 10:15, and the staff will be trying to cut down this wait and help get the train back on time. In the platform opposite stands 4979 Wootton Hall, which we saw before at Pilning, in a scene filmed 4 months earlier. Along the centre road comes an LNER Gresley J39060, which is worked in with a freight from the Great Central Line via Banbury. Driver Hughes can grab a quick moment of relaxation before the Cathedrals Express sets off non-stop for London Paddington. A local freight on the slow road is headed by a 57XX class pannier tank. At Didcot, a castle comes up on the Oxford line as we take another short break in our journey, while 5945 Leckhampton Hall is heading towards London. Didcot was a key focal point in the former Great Western system, a fact recognised in the setting up there of the Great Western Society's museum and depot. A 280 comes through from the Swindon direction, a civil engineer's brake van and crane behind the tender. In the other direction comes a BR Standard Class 4 460, the prototype of the class, 75,000 herself. Approaching Reading now, the Southern region puts in an appearance. A Class N Mogul stands in the sidings. On the south side of the line stand the Southern's yard and locomotive depot. Another Mogul and a 460 are in evidence. Now the famous Sonning Cutting, seen from the footplate. We're about to cross a Western class diesel hydraulic in maroon livery. there's still plenty of coal left for the journey back to Worcester. At Royal Oak, on the approaches to Paddington, the Hammersmith and City line of London's Underground runs parallel on the north side. Beyond this lies the former goods yard. And so to our journey's end at Paddington. In those days, an inconvenient station to work, with most platforms usable for either arrivals or departures, but not both. Next to Redhill Shed. On the left, an N-Class Mogul. And next to it, Battle of Britain Pacific 34088. Both engines being bulled up for special duties. At Redhill Station, a 1960 shot of Schools Class 30933 King's Canterbury, leaving the south end and swinging west across the main lines towards Reigate. .30932 Blundell's is at Tunbridge, looking somewhat run down as it backs empty stock out of the station. This is one of Mansell's post-grouping L1440s of 1926, arriving at Tunbridge on a down local in March 1961. The L1s were a small class of just 15 locomotives. .34067 Tangmere, though withdrawn as early as 1963, is one of 20 light Pacifics to have escaped the cutter's torch. The local Oxted push and pull arrives with H-Class tank 31177 propelling two vintage southeastern non-corridor bogies in this scene from 1960. The same service on another occasion with 31520. Dunton Green on the Tunbridge Wells main line north of Sevenoaks. It's 31177 again, this time on the Westerham branch push and pull, filmed in August 1960. At Westerham Station, the train rests in the heat of a summer's day. This rural branch, just under 5 miles long, closed in October 1961, and much of the route is today part of the M25 motorway. Paddock Wood, between Tunbridge and Ashford. 30930 Radley hurries eastwards. 30932 Blundell's again, looking as grimy as before. August 1960, and the branch train leaves for Hawkhurst, 11.5 miles away. A while later, the train is back. This branch closed to all traffic 10 months later, in June 1961. Ashford was the terminating point of another branch service, this time for New Romney on the Channel coast. Much more modern hardware here, with a British Railways Standard Class 2 tank built in 1956 and Southern Railway 1920s corridor stock in very smart condition. This service ceased in March 1967, with the branch beyond Appledore Junction on the main line becoming freight only, serving Dungeness Power Station. 34101 Heartland, rebuilt September 1960, 1 month on from this scene, and now actively preserved. Finally to Folkestone Junction, with the first of the Schools Class 30900 Eton, Mansell's masterpiece from 1930. The famous Folkestone Harbour branch, with its severely weight-restricted swing bridge, rises at 1 in 30 for nearly a mile up to the junction. 3 Southeastern Class R1 tanks storm the hill with a Pullman boat train in this scene from 1953. At the rear are a bogie container flat, a luggage van and another R1. The down Bournemouth bell comes by Bournemouth Central Goods signal box. Notice the brake-ended Pullmans, plus a further BG at the rear. Those brake ends were small and Pullman passengers can have a lot of luggage. Signalman Tony Hart was a useful man to know if you wanted a good vantage point for photographs. The view from his box is of a light Pacific heading into Bournemouth, while a freight on the adjacent line has a Birmingham Type 3 diesel, later known as Class 33, the well-known Cromptons. And so into Bournemouth Central, 108 miles from Waterloo. The fastest train at this period, 10:30 from London, did the journey in exactly 2 hours. Best time today by electric train is 1 hour 42 minutes. A commendably clean West Country runs in from the west. This unrebuilt version also looks in fine fettle. Bournemouth Central Station is not very central at all, the railways having been kept away from the real centre by the town's desire to preserve a quiet and middle-class dignity. This was actually a thoroughly perverse attitude, for Bournemouth owes not just its prosperity, but its very existence to the railways. Maps of earlier date show nothing at all between Christchurch and Poole. In May 1966, the boards were off for a London-bound express headed by Clanline. This engine is, of course, now famous as one of the most regular mainline performers of all preserved engines, with a contract with the Venice Samplon Orient Express. The bullied Pacific rebuilds of 1956 to 1961, being virtually a new design, were thus Britain's final and highly successful express passenger engines. Today, several of the preserved survivors are still as capable of top-line performance as they were when these scenes were filmed, more than 30 years ago. A strengthening move, something soon to be no longer possible with electric multiple unit working. 35003 Royal Mail would be the oldest of 7 merchant navies still on the active list when Southern Steam finished in July '67. This sequence, filmed from Central Signal Box, shows an eastbound express entering the station, banked in rear by a Tenderfirst Standard 5 460. The 7 miles from Poole have included the mile-long 1 in 60 of Parkstone Bank, lifting the line from the seaside to the clifftop level of the station area. another signalman who was a good friend of the photographers. From the box, there was a fine view of the locomotive depot. This is Bournemouth, home of the retired and the well-to-do. So inside the shed was a prominent sign. Quiet please, residential area. 34004 isn't taking much notice. On shed, we find two BR Standard Class 4 Moguls top and tailing a Class 4 tank. Both the Moguls were Southern Region engines from first to last, but the tank had been one of a large batch sent new to the London, Tilbury and Southend system. When this was electrified in 1962, the engine went to the Central Wales line, before that was dieselised, and 80134 finally ended up on the South Western. 80081 had spent much of its life at Bletchley on the outer suburban runs from Euston. A welcome sighting of a Lord Nelson, 30857 Lord Howe. It's Whit Monday, the 11th of June in 1962, when this class could still be seen helping with heavy bank holiday traffic. "30 years on, nameplates like this with a coat of arms fetch well into 5 figures at auction. Even corrected for inflation, that could have brought you half a locomotive when it was withdrawn in the 60s. With some inkling of the way things might go, management removed the nameplates of all surviving steam engines over the last couple of years in service. 34008 used to be Padstow. In February 1963, 35002 still was Union Castle. Just 1 year later, it became the first merchant navy to be withdrawn. Sadly, the M7 tank has literally come to the end of the line. But another M7 is still handling the Swanage portion of the morning restaurant car express from Waterloo. In 1963, there were Swanage portions on 2 afternoon expresses as well. And these trains conveyed portions for Bournemouth West, 3.5 miles round the town from Central. Right to the end, the bullied engines were matched on top-link duties with bullied Southern Region coaches, an excellent design, building of which continued after nationalisation. Here's Ellerman lines on the Up Bournemouth Bell coming in from Bournemouth West. The Pullman cars, in superb condition, are all 1920s vintage, and by this time around 40 years old. Crossing in front comes Combe Martin, one of the very first of the class to go in June 1963. And a last look at the Bell with Callington. We move now to another way to Bournemouth, to the Somerset and Dorset, one of Britain's favourite cross-country lines until it closed early in 1966. Bath Green Park Station, its northern terminus, a listed building, is now a supermarket, but here it hosts a variety of motive power, indigenous types, GW interlopers, and the BR Riddle standard classes, which found a particular niche here in the last 15 years or so of the line's life. The prototype Class 4 460, number 75,000. Historically, the Somerset and Dorset was operated by the Midlands, hence the LMS flavour of the allocation at Bath Green Park Shed. But structures and civil engineering were a southern responsibility, hence its code of 71G. though this became 82F after BR regional boundary changes in 1958. The splendid S&D J280s, of course, were pure Derby in design, the first 6 engines being built there by Fowler in 1914 and the remaining 5 in 1925. Though designed first and foremost for freight, the 280s were often used on passenger work as well, especially on heavy summer extras. But it's thanks to Barry Scrapyard that 2 of these special and specialised machines, withdrawn in 1964, made it against all the odds into preservation. Bullied Light Pacifics from Bournemouth Shed worked the line regularly in BR days. 34042 Dorchester leaves Bath in August 1960. A BR Standard Mogul in delightful Mendip scenery, August 1964. The crossing of the Mendip Hills called for continuous steep grades, sharp curves and heavy earthworks. Entering Chilcompton Station is 4F44422, one of the very few 4Fs which has been preserved. Latterly, provision of coaching stock for the S&D local services became a southern responsibility. In the other direction comes Standard Tank 80067. F48737 gets a short freight away from Binnegar. This engine was something of a mountaineer, having spent most of its life on the Central Wales line before coming to the Somerset and Dorset in the early 60s. A mile south of Binnegar, the line, having climbed steeply and continuously for 7 miles, reaches Masbury Summit, 811 feet above sea level, and then drops again on long stretches of 1 in 50 to Evercreech Junction, where the long branch from Highbridge and Burnham-on-Sea comes in. Evercreech Junction, set in deepest countryside and noted for its floral displays, was the attaching point for pilot engines on the heavy northbound expresses which once taxed the line to its limit. Mickey Mouse Tank 41216 came here for its final days after many years in the north. This is the Highbridge branch train, arriving in an August 1960 scene behind Midland 3F 43734, a type used regularly on the branch until the last few years. Notice the LMS Suburban non-corridor stock. The branch to Highbridge and Burnham-on-Sea, 24 miles long, was in fact the senior arm of the Somerset and Dorset, the more dramatic Mendip line to Bath being some 20 years younger. The original purpose of the S&D had been to build a channel-to-channel route between Highbridge and Poole, allowing traffic to avoid the slow and dangerous journey by coastal shipping around Land's End. This bold purpose seemed hard to recollect in later years, as the branch train wended its unhurried way across the Somerset levels, the surrounding country as lush and bucolic as any in England. After the regional boundary changes of 1958, Great Western Motive Power replaced the ancient 3F060s, which dated back to the turn of the century. At West Pennard in August 1964, number 2218 is lacking proper number plates on both smokebox and cab side. The then young signalman will no doubt have some happy memories of this pleasant line. Next station, Glastonbury and Street. From here westward the line had originally been broad gauge, and a branch to Wells, also once broad gauge and closed in 1951, trailed in from the north. leisurely lowering of the home signal doesn't even disturb the birds at Chapwick. The railway hereabouts is for the most part dead level, with the track raised above the surrounding wetlands, clear of the floodwaters which at times encroach. Just past Eddington Birtle, a branch to Bridgewater, closed to passengers in 1952, forked off to the south. Basin Bridge, where the station buildings are more than usually primitive. The broad gauge trackbed is noticeable. The rear coach of this local is a comparatively modern Hawksworth bogie, push and pull fitted. Highbridge became the station for Burnham-on-Sea late in 1951, when regular passenger services over the final 2 miles to Burnham were withdrawn. It's back to Evercreech Junction now, as we prepare to follow the main Somerset and Dorset line down to Bournemouth. This was originally laid as mixed gauge from Glastonbury as far south as Bruton, where it crossed and was planned to join the Great Western Main Line. At Wincanton in August 1964, 73054 heads south. In the other direction, 73051. Both these standards were lifelong S&D regulars. The engine shed at Temple Combe, where the Somerset and Dorset passes under and connects with the London and South Western Main Line. With no proper station of their own, S&D trains calling here had to climb up to the main line station, which meant a reversal with all its attendant fuss and delay. Many through expresses therefore omitted the Temple Combe stop, while local services from the north generally terminated here. Stowbridge, 3 miles south of Temple Combe. This is a passing place on the long stretch of single track between Temple Combe and Blandford Forum. A standard 76,000 Mogul heads a northbound stopper. The southern part of the Somerset and Dorset is as flat as the northern section is hilly, and level crossings abound. An Ibert Mickey Mouse tank brings in a southbound local, which the photographer will board. Light loadings such as this were the rule on stopping services in post-war years, for the line served a largely agricultural and thinly populated region, where road transport quickly creamed off local traffic. The local now approaches Shillingstone, where our photographer will detrain. Blandford Forum, as the sign says, was the station for a well-known public school, and 6 times a year would have been inundated with trunks and tuck boxes sent PLA, passengers' luggage in advance. Besides this, Blandford was the only sizable town along the whole route to be served exclusively by the Somerset and Dorset. The northbound exit from Blandford is up a steep half-mile at 1 in 60. The chief value of the Somerset and Dorset lay as a through route to Bournemouth and the south coast, and in the summer holidays the line regularly worked to capacity. But the hilly northern section demanded much double heading, with heavy costs in locomotives and crews, and in the declining railway market of the 1960s, the future of such a line was bound to be called into question. Broadstone Junction. Here the line crosses Castleman's Corkscrew, the original railway from Southampton to Dorchester via Ringwood. And so into Bournemouth West, 71 miles from Bath and 45 from Evercreech Junction. This spacious terminus closed in September 1965, when all services were concentrated at Bournemouth Central. T-Bay Motive Power Depot in September 1967 had only 4 months active life left and closed on New Year's Day 1968. A little north of T-Bay, trains are attacking the 4 miles of 1 in 75 leading up to Shap Summit. Overbridge near the hamlet of Greenholme made a splendid vantage point for photographers, though the north-to-south alignment of the railway here meant the sun was a problem through the middle of the day. This is 70029 Shooting Star, one of the former Western Region Britannias. The sheer volume of wagon load freight still on rail in the mid-1960s emphasises what a huge shift in transportation this country has seen. The leaden skies, all too common over Shap, produce plenty of atmosphere for skilled photographers. The upline has lately been relaid with continuous welded rail. Another trainload of this material is approaching from the north, probably from Workington Rail Mills. Duchess of Athol 46231 between Greenholme and Scout Green. A wintry scene from early 1965. As the camera pans round, it can be seen that the snow has come in on the north wind. You can almost feel the cold. A scene at the same spot later in the year. Away down the hill is the smoke from a banker hard at work. Even with the banker, this Black 5 is gradually losing headway as the gradient takes its toll. Speed is now steadied, and the freight looks set to reach the top in good style after all. The 17th of July 1965, with the sun of high summer across the fells as this 8F tackles the climb. Scout Green lies just halfway up the 4 miles of 1 in 75. This was one of the block posts that split the northbound road into short signalling sections, easing the bottleneck caused by slow-moving trains. The Banker is one of no less than 24 standard Light 460s transferred to Carnforth and T-Bay sheds in the final years of steam. No matter how splendid today's heritage lines are, nothing can really equal these fabulous sights and sounds of yesteryear. Bye for now.